So you visit a city, maybe in Europe, and you want to drink a good coffee. But you don't want to waste your money in some random coffee shop. You want to sit at a nice terrace in a beautiful historic area. This place feels really fancy. But why? Why does this place feel so much better than this one? While the reasons are subjective and can be many, one important factor is the quality of the urban space. The urbanist Rob Krier describes public space, or urban space, as something that should be understood not as a leftover void between buildings, but as a deliberately shaped entity in its own right. For him, the city is made up of exterior rooms, streets, squares, and courtyards that function much like a room of a house except without a roof. What gives this space their urban quality is the sense of enclosure and the proportion created by the surrounding buildings. If we use this analogy, we can say that just as a room gives you a personal sense of refuge and a place to stay, an urban space also provides a place of arrival. In his book, Krier identified two main types of urban space: squares and streets. In this video, I will discuss squares. What is a square? In urbanism, squares, also known as plazas, refers to an open public space, typically located in important parts of a city, such as historical centers, the middle of a residential block, or commercial areas. If you look at a simplified map of a city, we can see squares as nodes connected by roads. A square serves as a point of gathering and orientation. Unlike streets, which guides movement in one direction, the square is a place where movement pauses, when people can come together and where life of a city can unfold. Of course, a good street can also feel like a place of arrival, but squares tend to feel much more like a final destination. Squares come in different forms. Probably the most common are rectangular shapes, hence the name. They are especially common in American cities, since most of them were designed on a grid structure, making it easy to create one by leaving a square unbuilt. Trapezoidal squares, very common in older, especially medieval cities. Triangular squares, created either at the intersection of three streets, or by removing the building at the intersection of two streets. Circular or oval plazas, rarer, more theatrical, often linked with Baroque planning. Irregular squares, formed through organic historical growth found inside older cities. The shape of these squares are influenced by history, function, and/or physical or financial constraints. That's why the older the city, the more diverse their shape of their public space are. Squares can be more closed or more open. On one end of the spectrum, you have fully enclosed squares, one on the north side giving a strong sense of being an exterior room. One example of a fully enclosed square is Plaza Mayor in Madrid. This is basically a giant courtyard open to the public. The problem with such spaces is that they feel too detached from the urban fabric and more like museum courtyards than public space. On the other end of the spectrum, you have open squares. These are harder to define, but they are spaces with the least amount of enclosure, but still being identifiable as a distinct space. Most urban squares, however, are partially open, with one or more sides left open, often where the square connects to wide streets or open toward the landscape. A square is defined not only by its two-dimension, but also by its height. A public space is a three-dimensional space, just like a room. When we are inside, we may not always think about the height, but it's important. If a room ceiling is too low, it can feel suffocating, while if it's too high, it may lose its intimacy. Different spaces have different heights. A private room tends to be lower, while a large public space usually have a higher ceiling. In the same way, the height of a square can give us different feelings. Squares do not have ceilings, but the average height of a surrounding building creates a comparable effect. Taller buildings can make a square feel much smaller and provide more shade, and the large scale surrounded by tall building can make us feel smaller in relation to the space. This is why important squares with such proportion often feels like the heart of a big city, where humans sense they are part of something larger. Smaller squares, surrounded by smaller buildings, give more of a feeling of belonging to a local community. Modern squares are frequently oversized, designed more for cars or monumental gesture than for people. When the width of the space overwhelms the height of the surrounding buildings, the sense of enclosure is lost and the pedestrian feel exposed and disoriented. An example of oversized square is Praça de Três Poderes in Brasilia. Designed by Lucio Costa and Oscar Niemeyer, the surrounding buildings are stunning, but the space itself is vastly oversized, lacks a defined sense of place. It is often better to have several smaller squares or to divide a large one into distinct areas. The square is, above all, a place of concentration within the city. It gathers people together, creating a central focus. Its first function, therefore, is social, the first stage for public life, market celebration, political gathering, or simply everyday encounters. The square also has an important orientational function. As you move through the network of streets, the square acts as a node or anchor point. It interrupts the flow of movement, providing a pause and a sense of arrival before leading you into other streets. This makes it crucial for giving the city a structure that people can easily understand and navigate. Squares can have specific function. Civic squares with political or symbolical function, often in front of a town hall or church. Market squares, once more common. In many languages the word square is synonymous with market because historically they was used for trade. Residential squares, usually smaller in scale and more private. Smaller inner city parks can also function as a square. Of course, most squares serve multiple functions. Squares also have aesthetic and symbolic purposes. Because it is enclosed by buildings, it becomes the facade space of the city, often surrounded by the most important civic or religious structures. Often you can find important monuments inside or near squares, like statues, fountains, churches, or other important buildings. A good square is not just an individual room, but also one that works in harmony with the surrounding places. Depending on the scale, function, and location, squares can take on different values from different perspectives. Therefore, a hierarchy of urban spaces can form. Some larger or more central squares become the most visited ones, often earning the name Central Square. Usually, these main squares are connected to the most important roads or arteries. Other squares may be more commercial, with cafes and restaurants, while others function as important public transportation hubs. Different squares can have different levels of intimacy. If planned correctly, both citizens and tourists can use them depending on what they are looking for. A good example is the set of squares in the historical center of Sibiu, Romania. Here we can find three squares next to each other: a large square named Piazza Mare, a medium square named Piazza Mica, and a smaller square named Piazza Albert Huet. These three squares are separated by building, but connected by streets and gates. While there is no official function assigned to each of them, they still serve distinct roles. The large square hosts events and is the most visited. The medium one is more commercial with terrace and cafes. The smaller one is more intimate, often used by locals. Just by the way these squares are designed, you can see why they have different function. A large regular square with strong connection to main road becomes the city's central square. A less regular square with fewer connection to major streets feel less dynamic, perfect for terrace and seating. And the small, enclosed space can become a quiet spot ideal for resting. There's no clear rule for how to make a good square, and considering that a lot of valuable urban space has been turned into parking lots, we can be grateful for any remaining squares. Thanks for watching. In my next video, I'll talk about streets and what make a good street. If you like that video, please subscribe. Have a nice day.